Morning, everyone. And it feels like every time I run these monthly webinars, the topic that I suppose the feedback we're getting from business owners and entrepreneurs about what they want to hear and learn about always seems to come back to the same thing in 2026, really, around around commercial performance in one way, shape, or form, whether it's around marketing or new client acquisition generally, or more around profit, which is certainly the focus for today, and how your pricing and your pricing strategy and your pricing decisions are impacting your profitability. And so that's what I really want to look at today, because yeah, we're in I mean, many would say challenging times. And if you've been around in business as long as I have, I'm in my 19th year now, and I think the thing I would say to anyone in business is that change is normal. I started back in 2007, and then we got hit by the credit crunch back in those days, and then of course we've had recessions, and then I shared this quote a lot actually during the pandemic, because we got hit by unprecedented change then, and as business owners we had no choice. We had no choice. We had to respond really, or suffer. And I think that's a constant in business, really. No matter whether you think things are going well or not, our ability to make those changes and adapt constantly is really, really important. And I think that's one thing I've learned here, and I advocate that to all of you. That's why you're here, I suppose, that you understand that maybe there's something you could be doing that's better or different to what you're doing now, and you just want some tips and pointers, which is what today's all about. So let me let me talk about some basic pricing first of all. And if I go back to, I suppose, a very basic principle of how certainly many businesses come up with their pricing generally, and it's this cost plus model. In other words, and this is very common in food businesses, manufacturing businesses, and if you look at just the basics of how they're setting their prices, they're looking at their costs and basically adding a percentage markup to those costs. Now, some of you may be using a version of that model. Some of you might not be. It depends on your industry and sector. But just at a very crude level, I don't know, if you were making furniture and your costs, all the associated costs with making that furniture were £100, and you might say, right, okay, we typically add a 30% markup on that £100, so the price there is £130. Now that's just a very basic level, and I know a lot of you in service sectors, and you may have similar variations to this model where you're looking at hours on a contract or a job. So you'll look at your labour hours, you'll work that out. You'll look at your charge out rates, for example, which is effectively your labour costs plus some sort of markup, and you'll say, right, okay, based on those hours and the associated costs, the price, the fee for that job is X. So that's a very crude and basic model, still used by many businesses to this day. Now, and that's fine. That's fine. And we're going to look at that and I suppose the pros and cons of that model. We're going to look at other alternative models that might be more attractive to you as well. But let's see where this goes wrong. First of all, let's see where this goes wrong. And I suppose where it goes wrong is you work out what that price or fee should be, and then you look at what's going on out there in your marketplace, and what your competitors are charging, and that pressure kicks in. That pressure to say, well, okay, I think the job should be X, but actually I think we're going to need to bring it down a bit based on what's going on in our marketplace. How many of you are feeling that pressure right now? That I suppose that fee pressure, and maybe how many of you have actually succumbed to that? A show of hands or a quick comment in the chat box. Yeah, that's most of you. That's most of you. And the interesting thing is, I've been asking that same question for pretty much all the years I've been in business myself as a coach, all the years I've been running these kind of sessions where I'm talking about pricing. I always ask, how many of you guys have felt the need to discount at the moment? And guess what? It's always the same proportion. It's usually about 80 to 90% of the audience, at least. At least. Now, that is concerning. It's concerning. I hope I don't need to tell you why, but I'm going to anyway. It's concerning because if that's your pricing strategy and you keep doing it, there may be a significant impact on your margins. Well, there's likely to be. And if you keep repeating that discount. And we'll look at some of the justifications for why in a minute, because I'm sure you've got your reasons. So let's look at that. But if that keeps happening, you keep eroding your margins as a result, what's going to happen to your profitability as a business? If you keep doing it, there's only one outcome. The margins are going to keep getting eroded until, until, unfortunately, yeah, it's a race to the bottom. Now, I probably don't need to tell you that. And yet, most of you have put your hand up and said, yes, that's what we're doing. So you may feel justified doing it at the moment, and you may have your reasons. It is chronically risky. So today, I hope we're going to look at some alternatives and how you can defend yourself against that issue. Because I have this very sad game, actually. I play, as I said, 19 years in business. Most of that time, actually, I've lived in Greenwich here in London. And I walk around and I see all the businesses that start up and are in my area, especially gyms and restaurants and and takeaways and restaurant things like that. And as soon as I see a discount that they're marketing, because literally you can see it, I say to myself, or even if my wife's with me as well, I go, right, I'll give that business 3 years. And the sad thing is, I'm usually right. And that is the sad, depressing thing, is I'm usually right. And that is tragic. It's absolutely tragic. And it's a reality. It's a freaking reality in this country. Every time I see that. So we today is about how can you defend yourself because we can't, that's not sustainable. It's simply not sustainable. It's a great way to kill your business. And some of you maybe are doing that right now. And maybe if you keep doing it, I hope it's quick. As in, I hope you go out of business quickly for your own health and sanity. If it's a slow death, I've seen what that does to people. So you can choose a quick death, you can choose a slow death, or you can choose something else. I'm just being deliberately blunt and honest with you because I've seen it happen and I've seen what this does to people. So I hope I'm making that point clearly. So let's look at. I go back to I suppose, our business growth model. I've shared this I think I shared this in one of my January webinars where I talked about our system, our methodology to grow a business. And this is called our 5 ways growth system. And the reason I raise this is because look at the challenges that we're all facing at the moment with growing a business and new client acquisition. And that requires two things. It requires you to generate leads and it requires you to convert those leads. Now, you're predominantly service businesses, even if you're not service businesses, the feedback we're getting is lead generation is becoming harder. Pipelines are getting constrained. People's budgets maybe are tighter in some sectors. And people are taking longer to make decisions or maybe stalling on decisions. Does that sound like your sector? Possibly, yes. It's actually, we're seeing the same in our sector as well. So lead generation is hard work, and maybe you're having to do more content and posting and all of that sort of stuff. Maybe you often do, you're doing networking and having to go back to old contacts, and it's labor intensive, it's time intensive. Maybe having to throw money at it as well. Either way, there's a cost to your business that's getting higher in terms of money or time. Now, it's necessary, but my point here is you're having to work harder, many businesses, to generate those leads. And then maybe you get to the point where you actually convert some of them. And maybe that's a 6 to 12 month process in some of your businesses. So you put all that effort, energy, time, and money into winning that new client, fighting for that fee. And then you throw a lot of it away by a discount. That seems foolhardy, to putting it mildly. So we've got to be conscious of the fact to grow your business. And I did a whole webinar on this, and I've done a whole webinar just on lead generation. I did a whole webinar also just on conversion rate and your sales skills. And there was a recent one, actually, sales for non-sales people. And the fact, that there are challenges in winning new work. Of course there are. So we've got to be really, really careful about how much of that hard-earned profit we're throwing away on discounts. And just to make that point, and in fact, we'll talk about this now about, well, Parag, if I look at the justifications, one of those is, well, it's only a small discount to win the work. Well, I want to make that point on whether you really understand the impact that's having on your business. because you've worked so hard to get that point. If clients are falling in your lap, well done. But that's not most businesses at the moment. In fact, that's never been most businesses. Yes, there's a few outliers, but for most businesses, they've actually got to work to win that work. So we've got to be super careful about what we chuck away through a discount. So I want to look at the justification because what started as a model for pricing that you looked at your costs, you looked at your charge out rates, but then you look at what's happening in your sector and with your competition, and you then start making some decisions about your pricing. Now, I just want to say to you, let's just be a little bit open and curious to some of these justifications. Let's just revisit some of these justifications because when I say justifications, it's reasons that people have actually quoted to me and my team about why you're offering discounts. So they believe it's true, and maybe you've used some of these as well. And I just want to say, right, let's just be curious about whether that statement is actually true or might be a complete fallacy and lie. So I just want you to be open to this. And the first one is, well, it's not much of a discount. It's not much, Prague. It's just a little bit, and we're okay. Now that statement really depends on the margins that you're already making as a business and on your projects and your contracts. So first of all, do you even know what your overall net profit is in your business? Because you're making some decisions. I say, okay, well, how much profit are you actually making at the moment as a business on your projects, but as a business as well? And usually people say, well, oh, I need to check. Well, you're making discounting decisions without even checking whether you've got what's happening with your profits at the moment and how much of an impact that's happening. Now, interestingly, here's the scary thing. I did some research a few years ago about how much profit small businesses and SMEs are actually making. Now, you should know what your business is making, of course. So if you're £1 million business and you've got 100K of profit before tax, that's a net margin of 10%. Now, you should know what those numbers are in your business, but let's say it's a 10% discount typically. Let's just say, just for example, so in that £1 million business, a 10% discount is giving away your entire year's profit. Just want to make that point. Now, the research I did, I was trying to find out what the typical profit is in a UK business, and the stats were quite hard to uncover. But I actually found some data on US businesses, and I suspect they're very, very similar on US SMEs, and the typical business was making around 8 to 9% profit before tax. Now, this is just for example, but if that was the case in your business, and I know loads of businesses are making less than that, and you're giving away a small 10% discount, you're in danger of pulling yourself down into a loss-making position as a business. So as I said, it depends on your numbers. It depends on your numbers, assuming you actually know those numbers. So just be consciously aware of, is the discount harmless or not? Is it small, or actually is it wiping out your profit? The second justification, Prague, everyone else is doing it. It's common in our industry or our sector. Absolutely, it may well be the case. It's people are doing it. Now, just because the masses are doing it, does that mean it's a strategy you should follow? Well, I would be, again, going back to the whole risk thing. Let's look at the stats. Let's look at the data. What happens to most businesses in most industries in this country? What's the economic reality? What actually happens to those businesses? Well, the stats prove it. 60 to 80% have gone in 5 years. Fact. 60 to 80% of those businesses that make it from 5 to 10 years have gone as well. So statistically speaking, your chances of even surviving 10 years are pretty slim, less than 20%. That's a statistical fact. So the fact that everyone else is doing it, we don't want to be like everyone else because everyone else is probably going out of business. Because that's the reality. It's either quick or slow. And I've seen this where somebody's, well, they've done it and then they're having to prop their business up by not paying themselves properly or by taking on loans and borrowing to prop the business up. So that's a slow death. Or it's gone quickly. But the stats prove that just because everyone else is doing it, well, everyone else is statistically going out of business. So that's not a justification or lie. It's just stupidity. It's stupidity, just copying everyone else. So, but Parag, it's what the clients expect. Well, and that may be true. Absolutely, that may well be true. I mean, I'm in business, you're in business. Don't we want to negotiate with our suppliers and push back a little bit? You're not just going to say yes just like that. I'm sure that's the case. We'd expect some pushback. We'd expect some negotiation. We'd expect some objections in the sales process. 100%. 100%. We'd expect that, wouldn't we? If we don't expect that, it's pretty naive. So again, I looked at my the sales webinar that I did. I talked about some of these skills of objection handling and negotiation. We'd expect it. We need to have that. We need to do that dance with clients. It's temporary. I'm just doing this for a few months to get us through. Again, is that real? Have you just been doing this temporarily in terms of discounting? How temporary has it really been? Or has it been just something you've resorted to without realizing it time and time again? And the other one here, well, probably we don't have any choice. It's just what's happening in our industry, and it's this kind of shrug the shoulders and just say we're resigned to it. Prices have come down, the clients are demanding it, everyone else is doing it. Shrug the shoulders. What can we do? What can we do? So what can we do? Well, that's a good question. And I'm not denying that there's some sectors where that is the reality. The expectation, the prices have almost become slightly commoditized even. So one of the things, if you genuinely believe that and you've got evidence for that, and it's not just the lies you're telling yourself, if you genuinely believe that, then I would want you to look at the pond you're fishing in. And I hear this like, Prague, we want better clients. We want the higher fee paying clients or the higher margin clients or this sector, that sector, whatever that is. It's a very common issue that we see that, are you just in the wrong pond? I.e. the wrong clients, the wrong sector where that fee pressure has become normalized and you maybe you don't have much of a choice. Now, if that's the case, then you have a strategic decision to make. Am I actually in the right pond here? Am I actually in the right pond? And you may not be. Or you may need to add other ponds through other services that are not so price constrained. And in fact, I was in this position about 15 years ago, and I realized having a discussion with my coach, I was very much fishing in the wrong pond. In those days, for example, I used to go and do a lot of networking. And most of networking, there's physical networking groups. Most of the people I was networking in tended to be fairly early phase businesses. And actually, I realized that was the wrong pond for us because there was two issues with the early phase businesses. Number one, they were in absolute chaos. And trying to get them even to a webinar like this, or get alone into a coaching program, they never seem to have the time or the headspace to actually focus on strategic issues like this. So they weren't the right audience for that, and they tended to be very cash constrained. So I was like, well, and my team and I had these debates many times. Oh, but Prague, we need to help people. We need to help everyone. Everyone needs help. Yeah, I agree. And my heart was saying, help everyone. But my head realized, in fact, we had programs for those early phase businesses, but we just didn't get the same level of commitment, engagement, or fee. So we realized after a few years of that we were fishing in the wrong pond, and actually we didn't want to help the very small early phase startups. We wanted to help the established businesses who wanted to scale and grow and exit and those kind of things. That was very much more aligned with who we wanted to support. So there had to be a conscious decision to move out of that pond. And it worked. And I see this a lot with those we're coaching, where actually the biggest issue is this. It's just they've chosen the wrong pond. Now, if that's you, or you need to add other opportunities or other ponds, how do you do that? How do you get out of that pond? Well, again, I did a whole other webinar on marketing and some of the challenges with lead generation at the moment, and some of the big shifts, paradigm shifts, some deep set fundamental changes in how people are sourcing and buying services. And just to remind you of, I suppose, two big shifts that influence this. Number one, people are doing more online due diligence. This has been a big shift since COVID. People are doing more online due diligence. In other words, they're checking you out more. They're looking at your online presence, not your website. If all you've got is your website, you don't understand this at all. They're checking out your content, your blogs, your reviews, your your case studies, all of that stuff. They're doing more due diligence. And you may get that, you may not. And only one of those statements is right. So they're doing more of that due diligence because they're looking for someone they can trust. And ultimately, that's what's going on with marketing now. Marketing is not just about saying what you do and how you're doing it. They're doing that due diligence in pretty much every industry. Sure, you may have contacts who know you and trust you already, but more and more of your audience is doing this. They want to find people they can trust, and of course, they're doing more of that due diligence online before they ever speak to you or anyone in your business. And this has been a huge shift in marketing over the last at least 5 years. And so then I go back to what you're doing online, and does that give your audience the chance to be attracted to your business and the audience you actually want? So many people tell me, "Oh, Parag, I want this kind of audience," and they go, "Right, well, show me what you're putting out there that's attracting that kind of audience." And of course, then I get the shake of their head. Well, we're not doing that sort of thing for that kind of audience. Well, then don't expect to attract that kind of audience. You're going to be stuck in the pond you're already stuck in. So that's just a reminder from that session I ran about these lead generation mistakes and these shifts that are going on. Whether you understand them or not, going back to my point about change, this has already happened. This has already happened. Whether you like it or not, it's happened. The question is, have you adapted to it? So to get in that pond, this needs to be happening. That is not easy. You may be sitting there going, "Oh no, how am I going to do that?" Yeah, I mean, that's a big question. You need a plan, you need a strategy to execute that. It's not going to happen by accident. And then once you start doing that, you need to be able to filter out those who align with the pond you want and those who don't. How do you do that? It's through questions. Again, when you're operating your sales processes, you need questions, but you need questions at the start when you get the inquiry to effectively filter out who aligns and who doesn't. Because if you're just welcoming every possible inquiry into your business as an opportunity, then how are you choosing who to work with and who not to work with? There's no selection criteria. There's no filtering. By the way, if you're thinking, "Well, I can't do that, Parag, because we just need to take everyone we can get." Now, if that's honestly the thought that's gone through your head just now, if that's honestly the thought that's gone through your head, there's one bit of your business that's failing miserably, isn't there? That's a marketing issue. That's a marketing issue. If you don't have enough leads in your pipeline to be able to filter and choose the ones who are aligned with the kind of clients you want, then that's a marketing issue. Your marketing isn't working. Your marketing machine, your marketing systems aren't working. So you need to go back to your marketing, because you should be at the point where you get the inquiry and you can filter them. And you're basically asking qualifying questions, which and those questions should be up to you in terms of what questions do you need to ask. Of course, you need to ask about things like budget and time frames. But yeah, what else do you need to ask to understand? Does this inquiry align with the kind of client I want and need? A profitable client, a good client, whatever your definitions are. That should be defined so you can ask questions to understand, do they fit? You should know what those questions are. That needs to go away from just budget and time frames. What else do you need to ask them to qualify? And where are they written down? It's not the time to blag it. They should be written down. If they're written down as well, then someone else in your business can ask it. It doesn't have to be you asking those. That qualification can be done by someone else in your team, so that you know whether that's past your qualification criteria or not. So you've got someone, so you know you've got someone in the right pond or not. So that could be one issue for your business, that you're just in the wrong pond. But I would challenge that. I would challenge whether you're just telling yourself lies based on what I put up earlier. The other thing, of course, is differentiation. I talk about the purple cow a lot from Seth Godin's book. Are you a purple cow? You see a field of cows, regular looking cows. That's nothing special. You see a purple cow, it looks different. You're instantly interested. So how purple, i.e. how differentiated is your business from the competition? This is done terribly. And why do I say that? Because I go on loads of websites for our clients, and we work with a lot of construction focused businesses, architects, engineers, construction businesses. And I go on your websites and I look at the competition, and it's the opposite. Accountants are terrible at this. You go on an accountant website, it's all the same stuff on their website. Literally, it's like a copy and paste of their 10 competitors. It's the same words. It's the opposite of differentiation. Everyone looks the same. I would advise you to do the same thing, by the way. You're sitting there, it kills me when businesses spend agonize. Oh, let's get this website perfect. And you look at the wording, and it's just so undifferentiated. And you're like, how did you spend 6 months copy and pasting what all your competitors are saying? Because it looks the same. And you put yourself in your buyer's shoes. How are they meant to make a decision about you versus a competitor if both of you look like the same cow? And you know, there's only one way they can make that decision. They'll go, well, I don't know really. So it comes back to price, doesn't it? So that's my chat. In fact, my summary of that book. I mean, you can read that book if you want, but I've got a 3-word summary of that book. Purple Cap: or differentiate or die. It's that simple. And again, if you go into the economics of it and how many industries have evolved over the last 70, 80, 90 years, that's exactly what happens in most industries. Most business in those sectors don't differentiate, so they get swallowed up, they die, they get swallowed up by the big guys. I used to be an accountant. I started my career 30 odd years ago. That's exactly what's happened in the accountancy profession over the last 80 years. It's dominated by 4 big players. Didn't used to be. They own 80, 90% of the market, the global market. Everyone else is fishing for the scraps. Really, I mean, no offense to any accountants, but that's the economic reality of what's happened in that sector. So the differentiation is so important. You've got to be honest with yourselves as to whether you're really achieving that or not. And even if you think you are, what if you weren't? What if actually that wasn't the case? Just ask yourself that. What if you weren't that differentiated? So how do you do that? Well, USP. Some of you may have heard the term unique selling points, USPs. The uniqueness, the differentiator for your business. Now, when you get this right, it can be powerful. And I'll just quote you an example here. When I was growing up, certainly back in the 80s, you think about fast food companies, fast food pizza companies. How many of those exist? Too many. And actually, you look at how most pizza companies market themselves. How many of those are offering discounts when you get the flyers through the door and go on their website? How many of those are offering discounts? The answer is almost all of them. So there was one back in the 80s who actually said, you know what, we're going to differentiate ourselves in a different way. And that was Domino's. Now, I'm not a fan of Domino's pizza at all in terms of the product. But in terms of marketing, they did something really clever. They said, right, we're going to differentiate ourselves. But we're not going to talk about the pizza or how cheap we are. We're going to talk about our offer, our unique selling point, which is 30 minutes or your money back. And they ran that from 1983. That ran for about 20 odd years. And what they did, they turned into a sort of local regional company into a global monster, behemoth, massive corporate company. And they only stopped it, I think, because they started getting some bad press about knocking over people and things like that. But what they said is, what does our customer actually need from us? Do they want a cheap pizza? Or if they're dialing up our service, what do they really want? Because in those days, you phoned Domino's. And they said, what do they really want? They want 2 things. They're hungry, so they want something fast. That's what they really want. That's what they actually want. That's what they actually value. They're not necessarily after the best pizza in the world. What they want is some sort of reassurance that they're going to get it fast and hot, ideally. But they're not sitting there wondering when their food's going to turn up. So that's what they marketed as a USP. And they were very good at putting themselves in their customers' shoes and wondering, what does our customer actually want from this? And that ran for 20 years. So simple. So simple. But it differentiated themselves. And ultimately, another way of looking at differentiation is value. In fact, I prefer it. What's the value proposition? Not just the USP. What's the value that you bring to your client? Because this is ultimately I suppose the debate that's going on in your prospects' minds is, are they seeing the price, the cost winning, or are they seeing the value? Which one is winning in their heads? Which one is more dominant? Do they understand the value? And again, I would assume the answer to that question is no. Is no, because if I again going back to your websites and stuff like that, and I see the same what I call lazy languaging. Oh, we're professional, we're experts, we're design led, we're award winning, we're friendly. It's like that's not a value proposition. Isn't that just an expectation for your client? Isn't that just what you'd expect? The value proposition, my definition of a value proposition is why should they pay for your service rather than a cheaper competitor? Why should they pay more for you? And if you can educate your market on that question, rather than just a few lazy words on the website that everyone else is saying, if you can educate, and I use that word deliberately, educate. This is where the marketing comes in. This is where the content comes in. It's an education process that probably takes years, not months. It certainly doesn't take a 10-minute phone call when they first speak to you. They're not going to understand the value based on one meeting. So your content should underpin your value. And I just see this done so badly because the business isn't talking about value. It's talking about what they do or just an expectation, a basic expectation. Not why should we pay a premium. Now, the interesting thing about this is if you think about that statement, how are they making that decision essentially? How are they making that decision? Now, is it all about price? It might be if you're in the wrong pond. It might be. But do we all buy stuff based on who's cheapest? Is that how generally people are making decisions, either as consumers or as business people? Yes, there might be a few things, but there's other things where we're making the opposite decision. We're spending illogical amounts of money on stuff and services. And that's the first thing to get your head around is our perception of value as human beings. Is it logical? Well, no. Because how do we make decisions as human beings? The vast majority of our decisions are made by our limbic system, which is our emotional part of our brains. That's why, you think about decisions we make about which house we live in or which car we drive or which coffee we buy in the morning if you buy your coffee. They're generally not logical decisions. And that's because we're human. And again, if you study how human beings make decisions, we are predominantly emotional. Now, yes, you may be in a sector where it's all about price. So that's a pond issue. That's a pond issue. That's a marketing issue. But most of you are actually selling quite services that are not just about price. In fact, most of you, it's all about the emotion. But how well are you educating your marketplace? Do you know what that value proposition actually is? And one of those emotions, of course, is trust. I talked about the voice of trust online earlier. Do they trust you? Especially with high value services. That's why referrals generally get a better conversion rate because there's a higher level of trust. So your marketing and your sales process needs to build more trust. People generally buy from people they know, like, and trust. That's not logical. None of that is logical. It's entirely emotional. So, but they need to trust you. Trust is the most powerful emotion in those sales conversions. Again, I talked about this in that previous webinar on how you build trust. It's one example of an emotion. Now, we look at businesses that have done this really, really well, I suppose, really powerfully. And I just use these two examples, I suppose, just to illustrate the power of when businesses understand this, they can move to a more premium price model or value-based model. You're moving away from just basing your fees on what your costs are and what your competitors are charging. And of course, Apple have done this better than any business in history. 30, whatever it was, 40 years ago when Steve Jobs made the biggest loss in American corporate history. He lost $2 billion in a quarter. He got sacked, made the biggest loss. Now, in those days, what did Apple sell? Apple sold computers. And that was completely undifferentiated, and their business was out. And then they stopped selling computers, didn't they? They stopped selling computers. They don't sell computers. They're not a computer company. People don't buy Apple because it's a computer. People buy Apple based on a number of emotional factors that are deemed to be valuable to their audience. And we can debate what those factors are, but generally that debate comes down to things like being cool, being stylish, being desirable, being part of that club. I'm not an Apple audience member. I'm not their target audience. I'm not in their pond. Because I walk into an Apple store, I've only done that twice in my life, and I feel very uncomfortable because I'm not their audience. I'm not cool. I don't want a cool looking laptop. I don't want a status symbol, even though my wife told me I should have one. She said to me, "You should have an Apple laptop." I go, "Why? It's more expensive than my Asus ZenBook I've got here. It's way more expensive." I said, "Why should I get an Apple?" She goes, "Well, what will your clients think?" She said that to me. Isn't that interesting what Apple have done? They've created a premium model here, way above costs, based on what the customer perceives as the value, and it's all emotional factors. And kudos to them. They don't sell computers anymore. The same with them. These are the first class luggage tags. Why do people pay first class? Again, it's not logical. It's an enormous premium to pay first class. You're not going to get there any quicker. You're going to get a nicer meal, a bit more drink, a bit more legroom, but it doesn't justify, logically anyway, a 5 to 10 times multiple of the economy fare. That's not logical. Why should anyone pay that? It's not the logical factors. It's the emotions behind that purchase. It's the shiny luggage tag that's bright red. That means people can see you. Everyone knows you're flying first class. Ego goes up. Feeling of importance goes up. Ego, importance, VIP, massive emotional factors that people are prepared to pay a premium for. It's not logical. It's not logical. And these guys are pricing at a premium level. So the question, now, none of us are these businesses, but the question to ask you then is, do you know what people will pay a premium for your service for? Do you know? Have you found that out? How? A lot of people, oh yeah, Prug, I know what our clients want. They want X. So, well, how have you found that out? Well, and it's kind of a bit hearsay or a bit opinionated. If you understand the importance of that question, if you understand the importance of it, you should damn well be asking it. I mean, yes, you might have surveys, all that kind of stuff. If you're not getting, in my experience, most customers and clients don't want to fill in a written survey. If you're getting loads of them, brilliant. If not, ask. Actually get in their face when you're with a client, especially a high value client. You think about the money some of your clients are spending. The least you can do is create the environment to ask them that question. Why did you buy from us? Why didn't you go with a cheaper supplier? What were your real reasons for that? And you want to dig in that answer. You want to find that out. You want to know what that is. You want to have it written down. And when you use that, and once you've done that with 10, 20, 30 clients, you'll see a pattern. You'll see a pattern. You can't guess the answer to that question. And worse still, you can't think you know that question because you're not the one paying the fees. So that's such a critical question. My experience, most businesses don't really do this in any sort of structured, formal way. It's a bit half-hearted. It's the occasional conversation or chuck out a questionnaire and hope that someone fills it in. If they don't, you just go, no, you can be better than that. Absolutely be better than that. Because if you understand the reason for that question, you want to know the answer. You want to know the answer. Even if you have to go and meet someone and spend 2 hours with them and have a lunch or a glass of wine or whatever it is to find the answer to that question. Because you will see patterns. And okay, one final thing I would say in terms of premium pricing and moving to that model. How many of your clients are what we call raving fan status? So in other words, they're buying from you and they bought from you. Maybe they've done repeat business with you as well, where that's feasible in your business. And they clearly do value you. And hopefully you found out why. And they keep buying from you and they're referring you because they love you. And I mean, the ultimate raving fan, they're not just referring you, they're actually selling for you. They are talking to their contacts, their network, their friends about why that person must use you because they're literally a fan. They can't help themselves because you've built the level of trust to the ultimate level. They literally feel they're part of your business and they want to do that. You're not telling them to, you're not asking them to, you're not giving them money to even, they're just doing it. That's the ultimate fan. They're raving about you. Do you have all your clients or most of your clients at that level? So one question then is, if not, why not? What's suppose bringing them down a notch? I know we'd all love 100% raving fans. So if not, it's a valid question. What's missing? And then secondly, if you have got those people, great. Have you thanked them? Have you rewarded them? Have you encouraged them to do more? Have you made a big deal about it? Because that could be your lifesaver. I mean, I once had a raving fan client who's guy who runs a dental marketing agency, and I said, look, we've helped change your life here, Shaz. Who could you introduce us to? And he said, I can introduce you to 400 of my network. I said, how the hell are you going to do that? He goes, don't worry, I'll put on a webinar for you because I do them anyway in my business. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, I get 400 people on my events. And he did. He got 380 people registered. It was a really, really hot day during COVID. So only 190 turned up. Only. I had 190 people on an event like this. And he raved about us. I didn't ask him to. He just did a whole thing. He raved about us to that audience for 10 minutes. I just sat there quietly. Then I did a content like this. We got 16 clients from that event in one day. That's pretty powerful. So have a think about how that could happen in your business and where you could really work on this area. As I said, lead generation's hard. Slashing your fees is easy and incredibly dangerous. Maybe this is a better approach as well to help you move away from that. Because a raving fan referral isn't coming to you because you're cheap. Okay. Okay. So I've hopefully given you a number of different angles here to work on. And as ever, my finished final statement is always the same. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? You need to do something from today. Please, you decide. I can see some of you taking notes, which is wonderful. You decide what you're going to do. Commit to it. And if you want someone to hold you accountable to that, then myself and my team will happily talk you through what's your plan, what's your action plan, what you're going to do, what might you thought of, what might you not have thought of. We can do that. But most importantly, decide.